Hello, everybody. How you doing? Here we are. We're live. So we're here today talking with the Mad Scotsman, Mr. Capaldi, and Travis. We're going to be talking a little bit about Brendan, SCOTUS. Some of the. So for me, I want to talk about. Whoop, I have it open somewhere. Hold on. There we go. Sorry. You'd think I would stop doing that by now, but
You heard it too much.
So, anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about SCOTUS, and really, I want to try to talk about is, really what I feel SCOTUS giving a decision on this could have done. And even though there was a lot of people out there saying it's just a habeas case, I want to just talk a little bit about why I think even as a habeas case, I think this could have been important. But obviously, Paul was all fired up about this. And so it's part of the reason why I decided to just start this video, playing a clip of Seth Waxman. And, I'm going to let Paul talk about what he feels there about the Supreme Court. And then we'll maybe kind of talk about it a little bit more.
Well, yeah, but let's go right the way back to the fact that not long after Make and Murderer first came out, we got that superb decision from Judge William Duffin,
right?
A Wisconsin judge who had looked at the case sensibly. He'd taken over 2 years to consider his opinion, and he wrote an excellent report. I've been through and read the entire report and put it all on the video channel, and I thought it was an excellent report. It was strange that he didn't find that Len Kaczynski hadn't been guilty of ineffective assistance of counsel, but it was. I remember in an email from Steve Drizzen, he said, "Believe it or not, the Duffin didn't find ineffective assistance of counsel." But it was a really good decision. It was very well written. It was obviously he'd taken his time, and if a judge is going to take their time and come up with something sensible. Fair enough.
It was 91 pages, which is not generally something that happens. Generally, their decisions tend to be a bit shorter.
Yeah, but then of course, it got appealed, didn't it? It got appealed to the Seventh Circus, and they, it was like. They obviously decided 2-1, and it was around about that time. In another email to Steve Drizzen, I congratulated them obviously on winning that first round, and I said, "What is the next steps?" And he explained that the next step is that either side could ask for the en banc hearing, and either side could ask for the SCOTUS. In fact, it must have been even before the original Seventh Circuit. Decided to take the case on, Yeah. And you think for one thing, why is it that when the state appeal to the Seventh Circuit, it's granted, then when they appeal to the en banc, which apparently statistically it's even harder to get the en banc to look at the case than it is SCOTUS,
right?
But But what really shocked me, and obviously Travis is the expert on the sort of dealing with judges. What struck me was how opposed the opinions of the en banc decisions were. On the one hand, you've got Hamilton and his bunch of cronies coming out with all their cock and bull, and yet you've got the three judges, Rovner, Williams, and Woods. And the tone of their language, you could tell how much they, as in Rovner, Williams, and Woods, disagreed with their supposed learned colleagues.
Yeah,
and it really struck me how the sort of almost I could sense a level of animosity towards them in the tone of the language. I'm just wondering what Travis thinks about that. Hi, Trav.
Well, that's not all that uncommon. I mean, Judge Scalia once wrote in a dissent that talking about his colleagues that they're going to have to start wearing bags over their heads when
Oh,
they
wow.
appear in court because of how embarrassing, his colleagues, the monumental leaps, the twisted interpretation of the, so,
That's funny.
that part is not so unusual. The people who write the majority opinion, they submit their opinion. That's rooted, whether it's in the Seventh Circuit, 3-judge panel or a 7-judge panel. That is then rooted to the other judges, and then they write a dissent. The dissents are circulated, and then the majority opinion, they can reference that, so they kind of get the last word. But I think there's no doubt that the dissenters, the 3 dissenters, felt very passionately about the case in the en banc Seventh Circuit. Felt very, very passionately about it, and we read some of those excerpts, and very, very compelling language. They felt, it was a grave injustice, and that the system was failing Brendan, and they set forth the reasons for it, and
Right.
the only takeaway was at that time that, well, at least there's another appeal possible up to the Supreme Court, and that also, believe it or not, dissents, although it doesn't help the litigant like Brendan, at the time, good dissents end up becoming the majority view, and that's happened time and time and time again in every area of law, whether it's criminal procedure or defamation, First Amendment, civil rights, the 14th Amendment. Having the courage, it really doesn't take a lot of courage, it's their job, but taking the effort like Duffin did on an opinion he knew was going to be controversial.
Yeah.
I mean, and then the appellate judges, they need to set out what their rationale is, and as both of you pointed out in the past, the awesome analysis in those dissents, charts, and where everything came from on Brendan's interrogation, his confession, where all the information came from, and which again is a testament to the excellent job that Steve and Laura and that team at Northwestern did in putting together their briefs. That came from all of the briefs that Laura and Stephen and that team submitted on behalf of Brendan. That judge took that information and added to it and put their own perspective on it. But, the ultimate outcome, as Americans, we're known for, they played valiantly in the Super Bowl, and they really played their hearts out. We really don't care. We just want to know who's got the highest score at the end of the day. And it didn't go their way, unfortunately.
Right.
Just going back though, as I say, I found it odd being in the UK, the level of animosity, and I also wonder if one of the problems is because judges have affiliation to political parties. Here in the UK, I don't know of any judge who advertises him or herself as being Tory, Liberal, SNP, Labour. You know, it's not a thing that happens here in the UK. Now I understand a little bit about the system in America and how you've ended up with this crass situation where, you know, you've got this political affiliation of judges. But I'm just wondering, if does that help to create a divide among the judges?
Well, people have a political affiliation by nature, right?
Well, there's no political affiliation in the federal system, but I was gonna say, I guess in the UK they've reserved all that rancor and animosity and hyperbole for Parliament.
Quite possibly. You know,
there's just a gentle person's agreement that it won't spill over in court. We'll let it all happen in Parliament. You know, I don't know. When I was in London, we were given a tour of Gray's Inn, and we saw some. All of the courts are named in London, and you know, there's the Old Bailey, which we went to, and Gray's Inn, and you know, saw the history of it and whatnot. But for Christ's sake, they still wear wigs over there. You know, I don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, but I don't know. Scotland's got a high court that handles only criminal cases, which I kind of like. That would have been a benefit to Brendan, I'm sure, because when we start talking about the Supreme Court and granting certiorari or denying certiorari, we could talk about that more. But I don't know, you know, how many split decisions they have over there at the High Criminal Court in Scotland, or the High Criminal Court in England. But I would think and hope that they're not all unanimous. That's when you know the fix is in. That's Star Chamber.
Okay, well, getting back to Judge Duffin's decision, it was around about the October, if I remember rightly, was it, or was it more of August? Somewhere between in 2016, wasn't it?
Yes.
Not sure of the date.
But basically,
July or August, something like that. Yes.
It's about 8 months since Making a Murderer first came out, and one thing that's always made me think is, would the state have pursued their trying to keep Brendan where he was, but for Making a Murderer coming out? If Making a Murderer hadn't come out, would they not have just quietly said, "Yeah, let's just let it. Let's not bother with this," you know? But did Making a Murderer put a whole load of pressure on them, the state that is, to say, we've got to cling on to Brendan, because if he gets out, this is going to have serious repercussions in Steve's case?
So much about that is just guesswork. I mean, we can say it's a possibility, but I don't know. Do we? I mean, I don't know that the state would have been inclined to let Brendan go, even if Making a Murderer didn't come out. I have no way of confirming that's the way they would feel. Yeah. It's so highly hypothetical. It's hard to.
Yeah. Nobody knows the answer apart from the state themselves. Right. If it really was something that influenced them, but right. do you see the possibility of that being the case?
I see it as a possibility. I mean, maybe.
Okay. But as I remember, one thing you used to stress all the time is that even with the en banc decision going 4-3, that meant that 4 federal judges have decided in Brendan's favor, and 4
if you count Duffin, and then 4 voted against.
The thing is that even the en banc, even the judges in the en banc, they one of their stipulations is that we must not feel as if we're somehow superior to these lower judges,
Right.
That's their words. That they say that.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting that. I'm just saying Duppin wasn't there to vote. But if you count the fact that he is a federal judge and he voted in Brendan's favor, you had the federal judges that heard Brendan's case were split down the middle. That's hardly decisive. Mm-hmm. And for me, was all the more reason why the Supreme Court probably needed to get involved.
Bingo.
Didn't.
Bingo. Exactly. That's why those cowards should have accepted the case and should have done something about it rather than burying their heads in the sands. Because of the 9 judges, they only needed 4 of them to want to hear the case.
Right. I think it shows a lot of things. I think it shows that the high court's not really concerned about juveniles in our justice system at the moment. They're probably more concerned about some matters of corporate law that somebody's going to probably get rich off of whatever decision they make. So they're probably more concerned about some piece of law, case law like that. In fact, I heard that most of what they deal with is that kind of stuff.
Well, it's 80 out of 8,000 cases that they actually look at each year. Is that right?
Say that number again.
It's about 80 out of 8,000 that SCOTUS look at.
That's about right. They take about
it's about 1%.
Well, it's way lower than 1%. It
would be
0.1%.
It's 0.1 or
it used to be out of every 5,000 they'd grant 100, but now it's up to about for every 8,000 they grant 100.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean that's for me. For what we were just pointing out, the fact that the federal judges on this are split, and the reason why, for me, the reason why that is so profound is because we heard Luke Berg saying it over and over again like a deranged parrot. This is an AEDPA case. This case, the AEDPA is in play here, and so blah 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 blah, and basically making it impossible for Brendan's case to be examined in the way that it should. And AEDPA is there to tie the hands. AEDPA being there, even with AEDPA, there was still a split decision. That to me it makes the fact that they're split even more profound, because AEDPA was there to make this thing go towards denying Brendan. I mean, it's there to shift the decision that way. And the fact that it still came out split is, to me, a mark of the fact that this thing is not, there's not a decisive decision here. The courts may say it's the end of it, finality or whatever, but it's not right. And the fact that we had, the splitting of the federal judges on it, even with AEDPA in effect, is, I think, significant.
Well, I just don't think that they want to grasp. They didn't want to grasp the nettle for fear of being stung.
Yeah, could be.
I know. It's we're going way back to, I think it's part 10 of series 1, when Steve Drizzen says about the fact that this case is such a heater.
Yeah.
There was, I sometimes hear this business about, they're judges, they're not influenced by a TV program. If 40 million people around the world have watched Making a Murderer, then, these judges, they still live in the real world.
Right.
You're not telling me that behind closed doors that they aren't discussing, wow, did you see that? Did you, hear about that? It's a bit like, the Manitowoc and Calumet police departments, sheriff's departments. When you've got Ken Peters saying, I don't know when Lincoln Corbin went and gave those depositions. How would I know? Because you're the sheriff, you're the one in charge of the sheriff's department, and you would definitely know what was going on there,
Right.
40 million people watched Making a Murderer.
Yeah.
Well, it was 20 million in the first year.
Yeah.
How do we know that?
Oh, that was announced at one point. I think Netflix announced it. It was 21 million. I mean, that's where Stacy got the lyric, because he heard about the number, and that's where he got the lyric. And that was a while back. That was a long time ago.
Well, Paul just told us before we started he watches it 5 times a day. I'm wondering if he might be a million of that just by himself. But well, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if 40 million people watched 1 and 2 combined, distinct people. But not everybody comes away after seeing 1 with the same conclusions that we do. And as we learned today, apparently, not everybody that has doubts with respect to maybe Brendan have doubts with respect to Stephen, or even vice versa. I know the vast majority of people, almost that feel that there was something wrong with 1 or both of those cases, instantly gravitate towards Brendan, and then things kind of maybe evolve or progress with them from there. But apparently and I've run into them, there are people that feel that
Stephen is totally guilty or totally innocent, and they feel
Brendan has some culpability,
right?
Whether he has information or direct involvement, there's a range, but they feel that Brendan has some culpability now,
or they just have some issue with the fact that Brendan confessed, because that also didn't help Stephen. So there's also that.
Yeah, so there's not agreement anywhere, total agreement,
right?
And but so, like most things, you have to find what do we have in common. If you happen to be somebody that may be not a supporter of one of the two, but there are things in common that can be supported, doctrines of law, or fundamental things like that. But it's but judges do react to each other. The Scalia is one of the more famous folks that wouldn't
pull any punches.
Would not pull any punches in his decisions and characterizations of what he thought about. He would never attack the judge personally. Now, I'll have to go back and look at those opinions and kind of maybe highlight some stuff, and we can go back and the three of us can talk about that some more. But that part really didn't surprise me. I'm with you, Erekose. I highly doubt that the series had anything to do with what the Seventh Circuit decided to do or not do.
Yeah, I just, whatever they did. I mean, I don't know. I just can't. I can't go along with the majority's decision. I mean, citing the control question as proof that Brendan was telling the truth is just so far beyond ridiculous for me that I can't even believe they put it in there.
Yeah. Well, and as we saw the other night when we went through the actual petition for pardon and or commutation, that Laura and Steve and the rest of the team, including the Supreme Court attorney, the former Solicitor General of the U.S., and their local criminal defense attorney from Wisconsin, the whole team's still on Brendan's side and still representing him, even with the unsuccessful initial pardon petition. But they're all, still behind him. But they explained in that petition that, the current state of the law does not allow a court to look behind the confession to see if the facts that form the basis of the confession were fed to them or not. The court can only make a determination as to whether the will
was overborne.
Yes. And, they did such a beautiful job saying, he is why governors have the pardon and commutation power. It's for people that, in those rare instances when the law doesn't provide a remedy, where true justice cannot be achieved through the courts because of the procedural trappings. That's why governors have the power
to pardon,
with the exception of treason in Wisconsin, or to commute a sentence and to time served, which they asked for that in the alternative. They gave the governor every option. If you limit it to no, we want a pardon and we want him declared innocent, that's probably a huge stretch, but certainly could have commuted the sentence and given him time served because of this procedural thing. The state of the law is that, at least according to the majority, you cannot go back behind and look at the underlying facts.
That's what AEDPA prevents.
Total gibberish.
By the way, thank you so much, Cindy. That's very kind. Thank you.
Whether your will is overborne. And they said, it wasn't because he was on a soft couch and was offered a soda from time to time. They didn't offer him a Dr. Pepper, so
I know I'm just wondering where most of that $35 are going to go. I think Dr. Pepper should be thanking Cindy rather than.
If that case was in Texas and they said, would you like a soda, Brendan? It would have been reversed because in Texas, we either say, do you want a DP or iced tea? There is nothing else. You get one choice.
DP or iced tea.
Just going back to the Seventh Circuit en banc. Of course, if you remember rightly, at the start, the assumption was that there would be appearing as 9 judges, and it got whittled down to 7. Can you remember the circumstances? Was one judge retired?
Well, I thought it was supposed to be 8.
Well, yeah. One retired, didn't they? One retired, and
Judge Posner.
And it was reckoned that he would almost certainly have been, because I remember
statements he made. Yes,
Steve Drizzen saying it's a shame that he's retired. And did somebody not declare the fact that they had a conflict of interest that would have been pro Brendan? Or was it simply 2 that retired?
I don't remember a 2. I remember 1. I remember Posner. I don't remember a second one. So that's.
But was it not the case that Judge Sykes, we hear her talking and saying to Laura, "You must lose," in known terms?
I don't know, but someone just dumped a wheelbarrow full of cash and.
That was Cindy. That's why I was thanking her. Thank you very much, Cindy, for that. That was very kind. Very much appreciated.
And Cindy's Scottish, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
And
Erekose and I did a video on this, and there was something about a conflict, but there was also something about people were waiting to be confirmed, that one or two retired, and then we had folks that were waiting for confirmation,
Right.
that may have been appointed by the previous administration, and
Right.
but you and I did a video on it. I researched every justice and what their background
Yeah, I remember
was.
we looked into those judges. That was where you pointed out the political affiliations. I think that's where Paul is remembering that from, but maybe I'm wrong. But I remember you had pointed that out. You just said that the decision fell along party lines. I think is the way you put it.
Well, I try to avoid politics, so I said it on ideological grounds, which would be conservative or liberal.
Sure.
And so it did come down on those along ideological lines, which frequently happens. Now, appellate court justices are picked a little bit differently than Supreme Court justices are. The circuit court, the federal appellate courts, there's a lot of deference given to the state, the U.S. senators from that circuit, which the Seventh Circuit is the three states of Wisconsin, Indiana, and Minnesota. And so they talk to those senators a lot, and give deference, but it's all when we look up these opinions for the colorful and crossfire language. I'll also go back and look if somebody declared a conflict or not. Do you remember that, Erekose? I can't remember.
Well, the only conflict of interest I remember is people talking about the fact that Sykes used to be on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I remember people talking about a conflict of interest there, but obviously
it's not a conflict.
It's not going to be seen that way, which is something you pointed out in the past. So.
But wasn't there another issue that Luke Berg used to be a clerk for her?
That's not a conflict.
Yeah, there was that too. And then there was a bunch of other stuff about people who had clerked for blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I think Drizzen had clerked for Rovner at one point, I think, or something. I mean, it was like, it's just like, you can't, people are going to clerk for people. I mean,
Yeah, but they don't have conflict of interest in Wisconsin.
Well,
have you not been following this for 4 years?
They do, but it's not a legal conflict.
Yeah.
It's not a legal
not
conflict
seen legally
in
as
any state in the U.S.
Right.
The entire Supreme Court, the entire United States Supreme Court, all 9 justices have all clerked for a
previous
either
lawyer.
Appellate court judge or a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
Okay. Look, what I particularly wanted to ask then was that you were saying that the issue, if you like, that the Seventh Circuit had to look at was then it's basically the same thing, the voluntariness of the statement that Brendan gave, or was his will being overborne? It's basically the same thing, yeah?
Yes.
Is there no evidence of Brendan's will being overborne, Erekose?
Well,
because
for me, yes.
Didn't
for the courts, no.
Didn't Foster Hamilton say that there was something about Teresa had got something on her stomach.
Yes, I knew what you were fishing for.
Could you expand a bit further first?
So, I mean, it's like I said. Yeah, for me, yes. For the courts, no. Obviously, because the freaking stupid majority judges actually cited this thing that I'm going to talk about as a reason why Brendan's confession can be believed, which is mind-boggling. But anyway, so obviously we have the control question, and this is obviously a situation where no physical force is being exerted on Brendan. No, he's not being harried or anything like that. But they go ahead and ask Brendan this control question, and the idea here is they're going to give him a completely fake fact, and that they hope he will then deny, and therefore it will work as a control question because they can say, well, look, when we offered him a fake fact, he said no, and confirmed. Okay, so here's the way it went down. Tom Fassbender makes up his fact about Teresa having a tattoo on her stomach, and he tells Brendan, well, we know she had a tattoo on her stomach. Can you tell me about that or whatever? And Brendan's basically like, no.
Did you see it?
Or he says. Or did you see it? And he says, Now, I think this is where Tom Fassbender, was thinking, ooh, I'd like something a little bit more, decisive than You know what I mean? So he pushes further, and he asks Brendan, do you disagree with me when I say that? A question that Fassbender hoped he was going to get a yes answer to, because he wanted Brendan to disagree with him, right? That's what he wanted. He wanted Brendan to be denying his fake fact. That's the whole purpose of the control question. Okay? For Brendan to deny the fake fact to give more validity to his confession. Okay, Tom Fassbender says, do you disagree with me? Brendan says, no. When Brendan says, no, I don't disagree with you, he is effectively agreeing with Tom Fassbender that Teresa had a tattoo that she didn't have.
And he carries on with no, but I don't know what it was.
Right.
In other words, he's saying, yes, she had a tattoo, but don't ask me to, please.
Don't ask me what it was.
I'm trying to guess everything that you want me to guess. But for goodness sake, don't ask me to guess about what a bloody design of tattoo she had. It's
right.
And even that bit in the transcripts has been written down wrong. Because
right.
every quote of Brendan, he says, I don't know where it was. If you listen carefully, he doesn't say, but I don't know where it was. He says, I don't know what it was.
Right. Either way, doesn't matter. He's basically effectively saying, I don't know anything about it. He's like, okay, I'll agree that it's there, but I don't know anything about it. Thank you very much, Anthony D. Very much appreciated. You're very kind. Much appreciated.
Can I ask you both a question?
Well, going back to that question, Paul, so in determining whether a confession is voluntary, i.e. not coerced, you're supposed to look at the totality of the circumstances. And so Steve and Laura did a brilliant job of weaving in that you should take account of any limitations, cognitive, intelligence,
right.
Any of those limitations and you saw this in MAM, Laura arguing and saying, they keep going back, well, is it the test that, his will was overborne? And so, well, that is the current test. We're asking you to do something, but you don't even need to change it because that test contemplates that you look at the totality of the circumstances. And right. One of the circumstances we're asking you to look at is Brendan's emotional and intellectual makeup.
Right. Deficits.
and they did not. They didn't, go with that. They said he was offered a soda and was on a soft couch.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we look at the certainly looking at Leo and Drizen's article about wrongful confessions, one of the things that I've got to and I find quite interesting is the fact that they talk about the fact that the Reed technique is probably pretty good at getting guilty people to confess. The trouble is, it's so good at getting guilty people to confess, it'll even persuade innocent people to confess. And it's how do you know when somebody has given a proper confession? I mean, these are trained judges, and when Hamilton is talking about the fact that I don't see a coerced confession. I just see somebody that's slowly and painstakingly revealing the truth. I don't see that at all, because every single thing was fed to him.
Yeah.
Like Lucas, everything was shown him so that he
That's
could
why.
create.
That's why Wood did her little diagram in her dissent, where she took fact A, okay, whatever it might be, and then she laid out where where Brendan received it prior to confessing to it and everything, and she had that for several things, like 3 pages, where she had this diagram set up going through all the major facts that Brendan supposedly gave, and she was pointing out how none of them came from him, and it was brilliant. I mean, that was just.
Here's my question for you, though, and it is this comes to the crux of the matter about I asked a question a couple of weeks back. Are we more annoyed that Governor Evers has not given Brendan clemency compared with the Supreme Court not taking on Brendan's case? And my point is that I want to see Brendan Dassey released, but I want to see him released having been proven conclusively innocent.
We all want to see that.
Wouldn't SCOTUS?
I mean, how's that going to happen?
Well,
how is Brendan going to be conclusively proven innocent?
Well,
there's no DNA. There's no DNA. It's going to help him.
Well, the DNA that's there doesn't match him, but anyway.
Well, I mean, there's no DNA that's going to point to
somebody else
suspect that is the real killer. I mean, I think the absolute best that anybody could hope for is that if Stephen is ultimately allowed to have an evidentiary hearing on one or more issues, and then because of those evidentiary hearings is able to get additional testing, maybe in the RAV that comes back to people that it should not come back to, like Colburn or Link or maybe somebody else living on that property. But that's not going to conclusively establish that Brendan wasn't involved. It's
right.
And I think it's just I think it's an unreasonable expectation. I think Brendan should
that's what I was going to say.
Anything and everything he can do to get out, short of violating his own conscience, which means, without compromising his integrity,
right?
Not making up a story in order to get out quicker. But anything short of that, he should do what he needs to do. He has no shot at a civil case, or whatever shot he's got. The damages that a jury or a court would award would be minuscule.
Right.
They are in cases like that. He should get out and live with his mom and try and. I mean, how do you make up for all that lost time? You can't, but live life and do what he needs to do. But
basically, that's where we're at. Yeah, because as Travis is basically trying to tell all you guys right now is that he's kind of out of legal remedies in the courts. Not really. I mean, he has another avenue to take, but he needs something to appear as evidence before they can really go down that path. He really needs something strong to take down that path with him to help him prove his innocence. And so yes, he has another 97-406, but like that's right now we have to wait for something significant to arise before they really want to go down that road. So that's why clemency is the thing right now. They're at the point right now where they're like, you know what, we just need to get Brendan out. It's just enough people are convinced he's innocent. We just need to get him out. And I think that's really the thinking. And in a lot of ways, I got to say I'm almost in agreement with it, even though I feel like Paul and I do want to see Brendan's name cleared. I mean, I do have a very severe desire to see that. But ultimately, I want Brendan out of jail because I know Brendan is not going to hurt anybody. He's not going to harm anybody. And he, with his popularity, with how many people around the world love him, he's going to be able to get on YouTube and Twitch and all those things. He's going to be able to become an online gamer. And I feel like he's going to be able to support himself pretty successfully if he can get out of prison. So I am kind of on board with the plan as long as, just to get him out so that he can go on with life. But like I said, Paul, I do feel the way I do have those feelings that you have. I want to see his name cleared, but I'll settle for him getting out from behind bars.
Look, I apologize. I'm not a Wisconsin lawyer. I'm not an American lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, full stop. But I would have thought a good way of proving that Brendan Dassey is innocent is to prove who actually killed Teresa. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. Right.
And what
somebody's working on that.
What
the big roadblocks at the moment is the fact that Bobby Dassey and Scott Taddick lied in court under oath, and what pressure has been put on them from the right people.
Well, Zellner brought that up.
Zellner has, but what have Steve Drizzen and Laura Nyrider done to help that situation?
Because you really need to get off that.
Less than one? What's less than
Laura and Steve have done more for their client, relatively speaking, than Zellner has to this point.
But
he had him within 24 hours of walking out the door. I'm sorry the courts didn't agree with her, but they represent a client. Their duty is to Brendan. Their duty isn't to go and get on the Zellner bandwagon.
They're different cases. I'd like to point out.
They're
different cases. Brendan's case, not full of forensic evidence. Really, none at all. Yeah. Stephen's case, it's full of forensic evidence that Zellner is now attempting to take apart. So there's a fundamental difference in that way between the cases. So it makes it harder for Brendan's lawyers to do as you're suggesting, because they don't have all that there to attack the way that Stephen does.
Do they have?
What do you think about that, Travis?
Well, yeah, that's true, but. So what magically is going to happen? My information is that the team, Brendan's team, whether that's Laura or Steve, are in contact with Zellner's office frequently. But what, what magically is going to happen if they're, I don't know, what would they do? Tweet together, do Q&As together on Twitter? Everybody
You're
has
saying, okay.
I don't think anything magically is going to happen. It doesn't create a new filing. Brendan's lawyers can file, as you said, Erekose, a 974-6 at any time, but
Right.
you only get one shot at it.
Right.
You have to
Right.
bring everything together, or you have to show, like they are in Zellner's motion, why it wasn't brought up before, or you're what? Procedurally
barred. Yes.
And this isn't entertainment or chess or a game for these lawyers.
Right.
They have people's lives in their hands that have been screwed up by previous lawyers, especially in Brendan's case with Kaczynski. And they take up a screwed up mess and try and do something with it. But it's Zellner's good at her PR thing. That there's nothing wrong with being subtle about it. The best post-conviction lawyer in the United States is Dennis Reardon. Nobody's probably heard of him. Nobody. But he is the undisputed king of post-conviction work. If you've exhausted everything, Dennis is the guy to go and see. Based in San Francisco, worked on the West Memphis 3 case, and he is the post-conviction king. Nobody's heard of him, but you don't need to be on a publicity brigade in order to be an effective lawyer. In fact, it can detract. But I don't understand how they would work together if they're not working together, or if they are working together, which is my understanding, they're sharing information, how they would work together more. Brendan doesn't have a ready, available legal procedure to follow at this point. He could file a 974-06 petition, motion for post-conviction relief, but
he needs something significant.
Based on what?
Yes.
And then I think they're it would have been a waste of time, obviously, to file a pardon petition with the previous governor. I think they saw some positive indications. As well prepared as that petition for pardon was, there's no doubt in my mind that they, Drizzen, Nyrider et al., made inquiries with the governor's office. Is this a total waste of time? Do you want us to wait? And I don't think anyone told them one way or the other, but when all is said and done, I think they will indicate that they sent out feelers and they got a positive response. Now, the great thing about a pardon clemency petition is you're not limited to just one like you are with motion for post-conviction relief.
They can keep refiling.
They could keep refiling. Now, obviously, you don't want to do it every week, or if they're going to think you're a loon and they're just going to quit reading it. But I think what they're hoping is more and more people get on the bandwagon, more and more people sign that petition, more and more people in Wisconsin will research the case and become aware. More and more people in Wisconsin will
Put pressure
reach
on
out
there.
to the governor in some form, email, letter, that this is important. And, you know, it's really going to take the people of Wisconsin to change things around. That's what happened in that example in the petition for pardon, the that West Virginia example, where the governor, or is it Virginia, granted a commutation, and then a year later gave a full pardon for actual innocence to that same young man. But yeah, it's
You can do it
really
multiple
frustrating.
times, though.
But the answer isn't to get critical on Brendan's defense team, or wonder why they aren't, in my view, why they aren't working with KZ. It's what would KZ do? That, you know, the scientific evidence and scientific testing and whatnot doesn't carry over to Brendan's case,
right?
Unfortunately,
Because none of that was used in his case. So,
but
which makes his case all the weaker.
You know, I think one thing that's important for people is to so I've said in the past over and over and over again that, you know, we kind of encounter three types of people that are interested in making a murderer, and a lot of times it's overlapping. They're not mutually exclusive things. It's kind of like a Venn diagram, if you all know what that is. And I think there are people in it that are interested, like myself, about the legal aspects of it and try and educate people or explain the legal aspects of the case. And then I think there are those that are interested in true crime genre. For example, they read books and they kind of watch, you know, all the true crime stuff, going all the way back to, you know, the first big one was Thin Blue Line, and then West Memphis 3 trilogy, and now this great new format of, you know, 10 episode streaming
seasons, right?
Seasons, really in-depth coverage and so on. And
Sharon says you need new headphones.
But it's entertainment for them. So you have, you know, people are in it just for, you know, the legal aspects. That's probably a slim minority of folks. People that are in it for the entertainment of it. And then I think you have folks that are like Erekose, that are into juvenile criminal justice issues.
Right.
You know, there's the armchair detectives, and, you know, I don't know if that's a fourth group or if those folks are part of the legal analysis, but and a lot of folks, it's all three.
Yeah.
But the difficult thing and the hardest job I have is, I'm frequently always the bearer of bad news. Being the person that educates on, the legal ramifications, or tries to explain the, legal aspects of things. But
Yeah. Our own personal rain cloud.
Well, yeah, and it sucks, but it's I'm very optimistic based on the appellate brief that Zellner has filed. But I know there's an opposition coming, and it's difficult. Um, I've got a whole team of people right now, 5 or 6, that are helping me go through the post-conviction pleadings, so that we could take that information, and Eric and Jose and I can do a comprehensive evaluation of the brief.
Right.
We've been promising that a long time, but I just decided, well, let's do it right. Let's go all the way back to the motion for scientific testing and go forward and show the evolution of what Kathleen Zellner has done. And it's when you're talking about the legal aspect of things, there's really not any room for the entertainment part of it, and
Yeah.
that's all I'll say on that. And then pardon, it's a governor, and that's a political process, and so
Right.
Politics do become involved. But I think why a lot of people were optimistic is the politics in Wisconsin changed dramatically. You went from a governor who just blanket said, I'm not going to allow any pardon petitions. I won't consider them.
That was
I'm not even going to form a pardon board.
Yep. Good old Scooter.
Yeah. So, but they're, unfortunately, in the judicial system, the criminal justice system, we've said this over and over. They're all human enterprises, and they're all subject to human error and frailties. Whether that frailty is being dumb or being corrupt, right, or doing an improper investigation, or being a conduit to plant evidence. But one last thing I'll mention, and then let Paul respond, because he's in rare form. He hasn't havered one single time tonight. The logical games, the logical connecting the dots on the entertainment side are completely different than in the legal side. So, and that's really why we're doing all the work we're doing with this team. And if anyone wants to do that, they can go to your Discord channel, Erekose. They can go to the Legal Corner, and then under Discord. Legal Corner, it's current issues, and they want to volunteer and take on a document and help. That would be awesome. We're right now at the process where we have a system all in place on how to do it, but but on the legal side, you can't make the type of logical analysis that's allowed in the social groups or talking about it. You can't. It's not a game of Clue where you get a chance to guess at, it was Colonel Mustard in the library with whatever. So, and you see this in Zellner's briefs. The she never calls anybody more than a suspect. She's very, very careful about that. She backs up with an affidavit under oath every single scientific theory, every single theory or component of her narrative is supported. Now, to be fair to the armchair detectives, they have come up with many, many great theories and propositions, and they're doing it without knowing what Zellner knows. But trust me, if there's one thing I know on this earth, Zellner knows 500% more about this case than the most in tune Redditor, YouTuber, present company included. She knows more about this case than anybody on the internet, other than the real murderer. But
she didn't know about the bones.
She didn't know about the bones but she knows about the rap. She sent investigators to the funeral home.
We can surmise that she knows the RAV is still there because she hasn't found any paperwork to tell her that it isn't.
You don't need to surmise. Her words are, I have confirmed that the RAV is in the custody of CCSD and that, quote, it's safe, unquote. So, I mean, you either trust her or not. You're either off on a conspiracy theory or not. She didn't say, well, I'm pretty sure they got and she said that when after the bones motion, after she found out that the bones were returned to the family, unbeknownst to her, she came out and was not confronted. She was faced with the question of, hey, there's rumors that they've gotten rid of the RAV. And what did she say? I have confirmed that the RAV is in the custody of CCSD and it is safe.
Okay.
So, that's what I'm going by. I'm going by the only person on the face of the earth that matters to Stephen Avery legally at this point. I mean, it's fun and it's entertaining to figure out, this or that. But when you start blurring that line, there are rules in play that you just don't cross, or you run the risk of them impacting your client. And Zellner is extremely conscious of that. Although she did just flat out say that Andy drove the RAV onto the property. Of course, she has immunity, so not as much immunity as a prosecutor might have, but she has immunity of what's her theories and her pleadings. But Paul, what do you think?
Well, I've got so many notes here, but we'll go through them one by one. First of all, in the middle of series 2, Kathleen Zellner talks about the fact that other lawyers think that she's mad to try and find who the real killer is, that you don't need to do that to get your client off. But she wants to find out what happened to Teresa Holbach because she feels that it'll help Steve, and it's also a moral and ethical responsibility to find the truth. And this is why I was going on about the fact that Bobby Dassey lied in court. Bobby Dassey is Brendan's older brother. Steve and Laura are representing Brendan. I think you can appreciate the fact that there could be pressure applied that would be beneficial.
To who?
To Brendan.
Pressure Brendan to do what? Who's applying the pressure?
Yeah, that Stephen Laura,
Barb is pressuring Brendan to conceal the fact that he saw Bobby take off after her.
Brendan didn't see anything.
How? So who's being pressured? Who's
run us through that
who?
again, Paul? Actually, let's just run that back. Explain that to us again. Who you think is pressuring who?
No, I think personally, I think that seeing as Bobby and Scott are partly responsible, possibly totally responsible for Steve and Brendan being where they are, is it not a moral and ethical responsibility of Brendan's lawyers to help both Brendan and Steve in putting pressure on Bobby and Scott to start telling the truth?
And okay, so how would you intend that they would do that?
Well, I'm not the lawyer.
Okay, well, it would be court filings, and we were just explaining court filings aren't really in the best. They're not really on the best thing right now.
Yeah,
because we need something else to surface in favor of Brendan.
What is Steve and Laura going to do next? Are they going to send a letter into outer space asking aliens to come and help?
No,
when are they actually going to do something to help?
Well, other than getting the motion, the writ of habeas corpus granted, and getting Brendan within 24 hours of being released,
yeah,
they're not going to probably do anything until they can make some headway with the governor, because Brendan's case has reached the highest court of Wisconsin and the federal court for the area of Wisconsin, and was rejected by the Supreme Court. There, as they said in the petition for pardon, Brendan has very little, if any, legal options available to him at this point, unfortunately. That may change, something could change, but they're not going to do anything except like what they said in their tweet, which was they're going to work on Governor Evers.
So neither of you think that Steve and Laura should have any sort of input towards trying to get Bobby and Scott to start changing their tune?
I don't know what you expect them to do.
What would they change their tune to?
Yeah, well, telling the truth might be a good start.
I was pressured like Mr. Redaunt was, and I didn't have the fortitude to stand up to those folks and say, no, the fire, I saw the fire and it never got more than 2-3 feet high.
Right. I just,
Or are you making the assumption that Scott and Bobby murdered Teresa?
Well, they should certainly have been Denny suspects. They should have been. They should have been.
Yeah, they weren't, but
they should have been.
She's fighting.
She's fighting for that right now with Steven.
Yeah. But you're right. She does say, yeah, I like to figure out who the real murderer is. And she said, other attorneys think I'm bonkers for doing so because you're not required to. Mm-hmm. Why take that on yourself? But she said the reason why she does it is it helps her to explain to the court why the narrative can't be trusted. Right. Once you start getting in the killer's head, you're able to show the court that there was a false narrative presented. And then that ultimately gets you to what the goal is. But point in fact, that as much, and I think she said that in the context of getting evidentiary hearings, because she said that, fully expecting that the court would allow her evidentiary hearings, and
Right.
that's where she kind of goes with what she's going to go with. But up until this point in time, she has never, in any of her pleadings, said that either of those gentlemen were involved in any harm or disappearance of Teresa Hallback. So, she's referred to them as proper Denny suspects. She's referred to them in the context of the legal principles. She has said in her brief that the killer planted the blood, but she doesn't draw a line to them that's direct. And then on Ryan, she says and has said that in Wisconsin, if you're a party, help cover up a crime before or after the fact, you're liable and you are a proper Denny suspect. And so he remains a suspect. And I think that's in reference to his deleting voicemail messages and maybe the diary. I don't know. But, she hasn't. That is true. She is way off the scale in terms of that. Reardon doesn't do that. He doesn't lay out for the court who he thinks the killer is. But it's not to say either one's right or wrong. They just have different styles.
Methods,
but
right.
it's she did say that, and there's no question. And you look at the way she conducts her evidentiary hearings. She does it in a way where I think most circuit court judges or trial court judges hearing her evidentiary hearings are sitting in there, and by the time she's done, it's kind of like, oh my God, this other guy right here did it.
With the ham sandwich.
With the ham sandwich. That's an excellent point, Paul. But she's, unfortunately, because of the limitations of the circuit court, I don't think she's had the opportunity to conduct these evidentiary hearings where these things got fleshed out. And then, here's something to keep in mind too, kind of a preview to the comprehensive review Erekose and I are going to do on the appellate brief that KZ filed. She started off with the motion for scientific testing. She listed suspect A and suspect B, and can't remember which one. She didn't name them, but folks like both of you could figure it out, and Allie and all the other folks. She gave enough background that it was obvious it was Redaunt and Ryan. Her theory at the time of the motion for scientific testing was that it was blood from the clerk's office in the vial, that scientific testing would be able to show the age of that vial. It was planted by law enforcement. And of course, as she was able to do scientific testing, as she was able to get experts to come in and look at the evidence, like you saw in MAM2, like firing test bullets through bone and having it examined and so on and so forth, her theory has evolved. It's changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Sharon is asking, this would probably be a good one for you, Trav. She's asking if Scott and Bobby did come forward and said they lied about their whereabouts and the fire and whatever under pressure, how could that benefit Stephen and or Brendan? Or could it?
Well, okay. At this stage, it can't really help that much because she's limited to what she's submitted
Right.
at this time. But
Oh, right.
she's gotten enough information. She says Bobby was untruthful.
Right.
She says that an evidentiary hearing needs to be conducted to determine why he was untruthful.
Right.
And so she's pursuing that line, but the short technical answer is everything's been submitted. She can't.
Okay, so right now it's locked. She's locked into the appeal.
Because the Court of Appeals is not a fact-finding court.
Now, if a new trial were to happen, then that's where it could come in, right?
Right, but also if she's granted an evidentiary hearing, she's has several grounds for, including Brady, for an evidentiary hearing on why certain information relating to Bobby's testimony wasn't furnished to trial counsel. And she got an affidavit from Dean and or Jerry saying that if they had known that information, they would have cross-examined Bobby with it. And that's the definition of Brady. Information that's possibly exculpatory, or shows bias, like a silent plea bargain deal, or can be used for impeachment. All of those constitute Brady.
Okay.
That's an excellent question. Thank you for the question, Sharon. Cindy asked a question earlier that I wanted to answer. Did you see it? It's like 15 minutes ago.
I don't know if I saw, but let's go back. I wrote Stephen. No, not there. Hold on. Okay, so I have so many questions. Okay.
While you're scrolling up, do you have another note, Paul? You said you had a lot of notes.
No, yeah, just a few observations. It made me laugh when you talked about the fact that people are obsessed or have an interest in true crime. It's occurred to me that really the definition of making a murderer should be false crime. You know, but also, what about the? I do get the sense that some lawyers are a little bit conservative in their ways, and they are a little bit uncomfortable about the way that Kathleen Zellner has been using publicity to help the case. But has that not been thrust on her by the actions of Ken Kratz going way, way back to his press conference?
No, that's just a conscious decision on how she likes to operate.
So you don't think it gets the backs up of some of the sort of long in the tooth lawyers that see it as this newfangled way of doing it?
It definitely does. You know, there's a whole group of folks that prefer to, try their cases in court and not in the media. Vic Fizell, as a prosecutor, certainly wasn't one of those. He, I think he could sniff out a TV camera from 100 yards and get in front of it. But, that was one of his strengths, is that um, he's very charismatic and a lot of television appeal. And, I think that worked for him as a prosecutor. And I think it also worked when he was a criminal defendant in his own case. But
Okay.
but there are other lawyers that are very supportive of her PR campaign, the way it's conducted. But I would say, yeah, probably, it's going to be more that are like, oh, I wish you'd tone it down a little bit. But I say, you go, girl.
Yeah. Okay. One other question. What is the Wisconsin legal statute that says that they have to preserve the RAV?
Well, so there's a preservation statute that involves the bones, that also involves, so there's biological evidence in the RAB that's covered by that. And so that statute would require, presumably, that they preserve the RAB. The order for biological testing of the blood, I can't remember, but we'll find out by the time we do the comprehensive analysis. There was an order to preserve blood evidence at the trial, at the end of the trial. And I can't remember if that was just to preserve the swabs, the samples, or if it was also to preserve the blood evidence, which would be inside the RAV. So those would be possibly two. The state's on notice of the RAV being sought for testing. There was an agreement reached. Zellner is also on record as saying, and it's in the court documents, that they reached an agreement for Zellner's experts to come in and swab the certain portions of the RAB. But
getting back to the RAV4, here's the point, right? People are saying, is the RAV4 there? And you're saying that there's a legal statute for it to be there. Have we got any evidence of Wisconsin ignoring a legal statute? I think there is.
Paul,
I think there is.
Paul, let's get away from this crazy conspiracy thing that people are saying. What I said, and let me be clear about it. Kathleen Zellner said, again, the person who knows more about this case and the evidence than anyone else on the planet other than the real killer. Kathleen Zellner has said multiple times, the RAB is in the custody of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, and it is safe. Quit worrying about it. That's all I can tell you. Quit worrying about it. You and anybody else out there that's worried about it. She's not worried about it. Quit worrying about it.
and why should I believe the state of Wisconsin?
You're not. He didn't ask you.
You're not. You're believing Kathleen Zellner.
Exactly.
He said, I confirm. It's safe. Find something else to worry about.
All right, moving on. So Cindy wants to know, question, can they exhume the grave if a judge...
That's the question. Yes, that is, Cindy, that was a great question, That is still in play. Zellner, at the time she found out about the bones, sent investigators to the funeral home to try and determine, did you in fact receive these bones? Did you in fact turn these over to the family? Was there a burial? Was there a cremation? Zellner does not know yet for a fact whether those remains that were returned to the funeral home were buried or cremated. That was going to be the subject of an evidentiary hearing that the circuit court should have held after Zellner got it remanded back. But unfortunately, the circuit court said, no, I'm not going to give you an evidentiary hearing, and came up with all of these absurd conclusions that just didn't make logical sense whatsoever. And so that's one of the key grounds of error, is what we call it. It's a specific ground of error that Kathleen has in her appeal, that they should have allowed an evidentiary hearing with regard to those bones. And it could very well may be that if those bones were buried, not cremated, that there could be an order for exhumation.
All right. Well,
and Cindy, I'm certainly, everybody is entitled to have different theories and opinions about maybe where the primary murder site was, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But when when the lead attorney, when we're talking about the legal aspects of a case, and the lead attorney for the defendant, whose sole responsibility it is to try and get Stephen set free, says, again, after the time that she discovered they'd returned the bones to the family, after she had filed her motion, after she had gotten that gift voicemail from that state attorney,
Mark Williams.
That's the context where she stated on multiple occasions, and I think it was for her love of Paul, so he wouldn't be up at night and worrying about it. The RAV is safe. It's safe. Until somebody can come up with something better than supposition based on guess, based on speculation, based on whatever, I think we should give Kathleen the benefit of the doubt. The RAV's safe. There may be more than one. She didn't.
I'm not arguing with Kathleen at all. I'm not saying anything wrong about Kathleen. I'm saying I wouldn't trust the state of Wisconsin in this. I think they've proven themselves to be completely corrupt. Well, I think in the fullness of time, we'll get to it. My real bugbear is this, though, is the fact that Steve and Laura have been on Brendan's case since when? 2008?
I don't know. Do you know, Erekose?
Say one more time.
How long have Laura and Steve been on Brendan's case?
Wasn't it?
Well, one of his appeals
had to be before 2013.
No, because that's 2010. We see them in court at the appeals stage at 2010. So it would have to have been before that, surely.
You're right, Paul.
Yeah.
Barbara should call up Lauren and Steve and Laura and say, you're fired. I'm going to get some of these people on Reddit and whatnot to come in and start speaking on Brendan's behalf. Is your point that they've been on the case 10 years and they haven't done anything? They won. They won. You cannot guess or foretell what a court is going to do. That is the state of the law in the United States. No one can undo the fact that Brendan's confession is legally valid. It will never be held that it was coerced. So do you quit and walk away and say, well, we've done everything for Brendan, we're on to the next one? Or do you hang in there with your team and continue to fight the fight?
Yes, the point I was going to make was the fact that Zellner's only been on this case for less than 4 years now.
And what has she gotten?
She got a lot further.
She's got 2 remands. That's it. She's gotten squat because she has a Stonewall circuit court judge. You know, again, you're trying apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You know, she is nowhere closer to getting Stephen free. She's never been as close as Lauren and Steve are. But does that take away from what Kathleen's doing? What did Kathleen say is the average time to get one of these cases turned around? Average 15 years. You know, Laura and Steve fought the good fight, took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. They refused to hear it. Need 4 votes. They didn't get 4. We'll never know how many, if they got, if any. You know, that's it. It's over. You don't get to replay the game, unfortunately. You know, so you try and go another route. And that's why I wanted to go through that petition for pardon to, you know, put an end to this notion that Laura and Steve aren't doing anything for Brendan. You know, it's not that long of a petition, 20 pages at the most, probably less than that. And, you know, I challenge anybody to read that petition and what went into that and say that Laura and Steve are not doing everything they possibly can to get him out of prison. I would dare venture to say they're doing more than 99% of the people out there.
Are they doing more than Kathleen Zellner?
Yeah, I think they're doing the same amount as Kathleen Zellner, which is doing everything you possibly can that is procedurally appropriate, and that is a viable option. You know,
and who do you think is going to be released first?
Earphones. They don't have the luxury of sending, willy-nilly stuff to people.
Who do you think is going to be released first?
The sad fact is neither one of them may be released.
You just had to keep asking the rain cloud, didn't you?
I'd like to see him walk out same day, same time. But, it's...
Well, if
I
give you a tenner to take down the book today to put money on who's going to get out first, okay, it's my money. It's not going to cost you a penny. Who's you going to put your money on to be out first? Erekose.
Oh, you're going to, okay.
Both of you. Who's your money on?
All right. Well, I know what Travis is going to say. He's going to look for the bet that chooses neither. he's going to look for the push, you know,
No,
because after the way
I
you
would
just
never.
answered.
I would never do that. I would never do that.
Yeah. All
I
right.
would
Well,
never do
anyway.
that.
Well, I'm sure there's a betting equivalent to that, but okay, good to know, Travis, that you wouldn't do that. So,
I'll
as
pick
far
one.
as who would get out
I'll pick
first,
one.
I don't know. It's so difficult to tell. I'm basically looking at a couple years on both of them. I mean, I'm thinking it's going to take a couple years. If a pardon happens, it'll take a couple years for them to convince Evers of that. And I'm convinced that Stephen's probably going to be in court for a couple years before we have anything really definite.
Well, okay.
So it's hard for me to say, but I don't know. You want me to flip a coin on it?
No. Here's mine too. Kathleen Zellner gets an evidentiary hearing. Everything that the state presented gets impeached. Is that the right word?
If what?
The state.
Everything that the state presented at the original trial gets impeached.
The circuit court would be reversed on a number of issues, and then there would be evidentiary hearing,
Right.
and then the circuit court would make findings of fact, and then would rule whether she's entitled to a new trial or not, and then either side could appeal that decision back on up to the Court of Appeals. But the term would be that the lower court's decisions would be reversed.
Mm-hmm. So eventually, Kathleen Zellner gets her day in court.
Hopefully.
Everything that the state has presented is shown to be fabricated.
That's not what's required for her to get him a new trial.
She
doesn't have to show any fabrication. She only needs to show, one, that Stephen didn't receive effective assistance of counsel, and there's several issues that she's arguing that on, or that the state withheld evidence, Brady, or that the state destroyed evidence in bad faith, Youngblood / violated the evidence preservation statute. Mm-hmm. But I want to be clear, people are hoping that the outcome of what Kathleen is doing will result in establishing that there was fabricated evidence or lead to the discovery of the real killer. That may or may not happen. Now, if she is successful in getting Stephen out, and she pursues a civil case, some of those answers may be discovered, just like it was with Stephen's first civil case. But yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. So yeah, she wins. She shows whatever, either a Brady violation, a Youngblood violation, or a IAC violation, and then a new trial is ordered, and then he either goes to a new trial and is acquitted, or the state may decide, based on what Kathleen has established, not to retry the case. And then he's out and he's free. And then what was the next thing you were going to say, Paul?
Well, sorry, let's go back a step.
Okay.
Because when Making a Murderer first came out, I heard an interview given by Brad Schimmel, because he was the AG at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said that once Making a Murderer had come out, that he'd been in touch with the Holbachs and assured them that the state would be prepared to take, to do a retrial if necessary. Right. But my question is this: once you've had an evidentiary hearing that shows,
he was talking about retrial already then. Really?
Yes.
Yeah, it's posturing. Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
It's like that Texas case recently. But yeah, go ahead.
If all the evidence that they've got has been shown to be false, would they really be that naive to go to trial again?
Well, let
They're
me
going to try to
answer
argue
your
that it isn't
question
false.
directly. If Kathleen is able to conclusively, scientifically show that the blood evidence inside the RAB is bogus, there's no way they retry that case because they've really got nothing except the key, and the key is so suspect that even Kratz argued that even if you think the key was planted, there's still plenty to convict on. But so if she can conclusively establish that the Stephen's blood in the RAB is bogus, and she's nowhere near close to that yet, but she hadn't had an evidentiary hearing yet. But assuming she's able to establish that, then there's no way they retry it. If the blood evidence of Stephen is not conclusively shown to be suspect or planted or whatever, they could retry him, and they could retry him, but it's a whole different ball game. Everything resets. So then all of the different theories that people have developed or come up with, everything's an issue. Even requiring the state to show legally that Teresa Halbach is in fact deceased. I think it was shown at the trial she was deceased. What I'm saying is everything resets back to zero.
But let's go back, because you talk quite rightly, and I liked your point about the blood evidence, because that's a big thing. Kathleen Zellner has got experts that will go in and say quite categorically there is no way that somebody with a bleeding hand would leave the blood in those places.
One expert who will disagree with the state's expert who testified at trial, the exact opposite. But she does have a very well-respected blood spatter expert who's done an affidavit that's attached to the motion for post-conviction relief. Erekose, what's his name?
That is Stuart James.
Stuart James is
or is
sworn. Pardon?
Or is it the other one?
McGarry. No, I think it's James, isn't it?
No, not McCrary. McCrary's the FBI.
FBI man.
No, it's
it matters not at this point.
Yeah.
But she's got a renowned expert that says the exact opposite of what the expert at trial said. But she's got that expert for two reasons. One is to show that it was ineffective assistance of counsel for Stephen's trial lawyers not to have retained their own blood spatter expert. Right. And then number two, she also got that in there to because it went unaddressed essentially, other than the pretty good cross examination of Buting, but ultimately not enough by having your own expert, but also put it on there to show that what the state presented was a false narrative and to undermine the confidence of the verdict. But it's not conclusive. If it goes to an evidentiary hearing, that expert will testify, and you can fully expect that the state will vigorously cross-examine that expert,
Right.
and then you can fully expect that the state will bring in their own experts.
Yeah, we got to remember it's an argumentative process. KZ doesn't just walk into court and drop the mic and walk out. You know,
Adversarial process. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's an adversarial process,
So-
and adversarial means there's two sides, and
But are they seriously going to wheel out Nick Stalke, who is actually a handwriting expert?
Well, that's what KZ will argue in court. She will talk about the fact that this guy is maybe marginally qualified, and she'll bring that in as evidence. Right?
So are they going to bring in another expert to say that those bloodstains are quite clearly the bloodstains that were produced by somebody's actively bleeding hand?
I don't know if they'll bring in another expert, maybe the same one that testified at trial. But yeah,
we'll have to see. That's their decision to make.
Yeah. So as lawyers, we don't have the luxury of stopping our inquiry after we read, after we prepare our side, or everything has to be prepared with the anticipation of what the response is going to be. And Zellner has done this throughout the process, is that she's, anticipating what the other side is going to come back with, and she's, trying to structure things. She's also trying to box in lay witnesses, like people that lived on that property, for example, or former boyfriends, for example. But again, her theory has evolved. She started out with the motion for scientific testing, saying that the blood was planted by law enforcement. This is what I'm going to do to test that and prove to the court it was planted by law enforcement. And then it came from the blood vial. That she went out, got those experts, and they said, well, we don't think you're right on that, Kathleen. This is what we think happened. And she went where the science went. And her theories have evolved. And so I guarantee you the state is going to have an answer for everything. Whether it's sufficient or not
will be a matter for the jury or, the whoever else.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right. Well, we are coming up on 2 hours. So I guess I will say let's kind of wrap up.
I'm halfway through my question.
You're halfway through? Yeah.
Let him get a few more out. We have 7 minutes left.
It's one question takes 30 minutes. Are you kidding me?
I'll keep my answers 4 words or less. 4 words or less. I would say Brendan will be released before Stephen.
I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to say that I think it's going to be a case of Kathleen Zellner is going to get Steve out, and then I think Governor Evers will be quite happy to grant the clemency.
That is, it's probably got more thought and substance behind it than my total guess and speculation. But I'm willing to put a name down. What are we what are we betting each other?
Can of Dr. Pepper.
Oh, if it's real cane sugar, that could be valuable.
Yep.
So,
Travis, you haven't given your answer yet.
Of who getting out?
Yeah, first.
Like I said, I can flip a coin. Here, let me flip a coin. They're both, as far as I can tell, they're both 2 years out, really, in my opinion. So here, tails is Brendan, heads is Steve. Here we go. Tails it is. Brendan's getting out first.
Okay.
And,
Just Brendan getting out, help Steve.
I hope by people seeing this, if they understand and they know the three of us well enough, that we are not minimizing the seriousness of
Sure.
the hurdles that Brendan and Stephen face, and that, you know, we're not making sport of this. It's, you just do things to bide the time. But I never even thought of it before. But you've been rewatching Ma'am, and there's a part in there, Paul, where word gets to Stephen that Brendan has won his federal habeas petition. And I think Stephen says in there, well, I thought I would be the one getting out first, but it's, to me, it sounded like he was genuinely happy for his nephew.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Steve knows what it's like to be wrongfully convicted from the first time. You know, I mean, he's gone through it all again, but he remembers being, how old was he? 22? When, you know, with 5 kids, when they locked him up the first time.
Yeah, and he totally lost all of that.
Yeah.
Totally lost all of that. Okay, ask one more question.
Well, you actually have one more question here from Cindy, Trav.
Good.
She's asking about if there is proof of framing. Casey brings that into court eventually. Does that get everything thrown out? I mean, I guess she's asking about if there's proof of framing or planting, will there be a fruit of the poisonous tree situation?
If there's proof of planting or framing, okay, so if there's proof of planning or framing by a civilian, the real murderer lives on the property and they planted the evidence, then and that's corroborated. The technically it would just be a grant. It would be reversed. Wouldn't even be a new trial. It would be based on actual innocence. The same way, you know, DNA coming back and proving somebody else did it. If it's shown that law enforcement planted or fabricated evidence, it could be one of two things. It could be that it reversed and a finding of innocence is entered. Depending what is determined to be planted or fabricated, the ruling could also be that it's not going to be actual innocence. It's going to be remanded for a new trial, but that evidence obviously would be excluded, not because it's fruit of the poisonous tree, it's because it was a violation of due process.
All right, there we go. So, anything else there, Capaldi? I'll let you get in one more here.
No, I've just written that, you know, my main concern is that, you know, when it comes to all of this, it needs to be done right. I get that. It just needs to be done a hell of a lot quicker.
We all want it faster.
Who was the better composer, Mozart or Beethoven?
Say it's subjective.
I would say Beethoven, because he lived longer, more works for orchestra, developed the from classical music into romantic music. Mozart's music, As soon as Mozart starts playing, you can tell it's Mozart. With Beethoven, some of his early stuff doesn't, is so completely different to some of his later stuff. He's evolved, but he lived long. I mean, Mozart died when he was about 40 years old.
Which was a long old life back then, right?
Well, Beethoven lived a lot longer, but of course Beethoven went deaf, didn't he?
Yeah.
From
I got
what? From syphilis?
I can't remember exactly what it was that caused him to go deaf, but believe it or not, you know how a lot of students they play to a metronome. The tick tock, yeah. The
Yes.
metronome that keeps time for them. Well, the original metronome was invented by a guy called Merrick, who actually knew Beethoven. And as Beethoven was going deaf, he actually made him a hearing aid. It was a big horn type thing, but at least it helped him.
Right. Oh, yeah. Interesting.
So I would say Beethoven.
So that obviously was an example on, just like the quality of representation that Brendan is receiving in the past and currently. Although with regard to Lynn Kaczynski, I don't think there's any debate. But how much is Zellner doing for Stephen Avery, and I think they're both great legal teams, and I think they have different styles.
Yeah.
But I think Beethoven and Mozart are
both good but different.
Well, they're just they're in a sphere that comes around once a musical era, and the same with trying to predict whose case may end up winding through quicker with a successful conclusion.
Right.
Those are things that who's the greatest baseball team of all time? Who's the greatest quarterback of all time? And those are fun questions to debate, but I really had to pause for a second. It's a legitimate question that Paul raised, and I'll conclude with this and say good night. But when you talk about the greatest sports person or the greatest golfer or the greatest golf course in Scotland or the best scotch in Scotland or who's the best modern day composer, whatever, what's the best opera, what's the best song to play on the accordion if you want to attract cows to come in. It's just different when you're talking about a real person languishing in jail that is hanging on to the thinnest strands of hope, but still keeps a positive attitude and still is encouraged by receiving letters and whatnot. It just caused me to take pause. I'm not saying the question was wrong, and I ultimately answered it, but
right.
Thank you for that question, Paul. It made me look inward for just a second about what's really at stake. And while we all may disagree about what is enough done, can more be done, is it positive for people to be armchair detectives and be concerned about where the rab is? It is a positive, but ultimately what's at stake is two men in prison that have a a long road ahead of them, both of them. And I think we're talking the best case scenario. Erekose's belief is a couple of years, which I think is pretty accurate. But, that's what it's all about. If that's why you're in this thing, for the folks that are in it for the entertainment and the drama. I can't really help you with that. There's certainly a lot of entertainment value based on 40 million viewers, 40 million views. And we've certainly seen a fair share of drama across many, many platforms. But I'm not really about that. I'm trying to educate people, and I always get great legal questions, whether I'm on Paul's channel or Erekose's channel. Y'all have very, very smart subscribers, and I hope just a little bit that I can educate people about the legal process and not be too much of a black cloud.
Yeah, well, I know you don't try to be, but So we are over 2 hours. So I'm going to close up with something I brought up at the beginning of this video, and that is my feeling that there was a lot of people saying when Brendan was, making his way through the appellate courts, the federal courts there on his habeas petition, that everybody kept saying, oh, if it goes to SCOTUS, it's just a habeas case. It doesn't matter. It's just a habeas case, blah, blah, blah. I kept hearing that. And I'm just like, I cannot tell you how much I disagree with that. It's ridiculous how much I disagree with that, because number one, what are other kids in the future that get kind of shafted by the state and wrongly convicted and coerced like this? What path do they have to a remedy? They don't. What path did Brendan have? He didn't. He nearly forged a path. He literally nearly forged a path for other juveniles to potentially be able to follow him down, to potentially get around AEDPA. That's what SCOTUS could have done for juveniles, especially mentally limited ones, or at least ones with deficits, intellectual deficits and that sort of thing, that it could have given those kind of kids a path to bounce out of the state system, which is intent on holding them and doesn't want to recognize special care and totality of circumstances, and doesn't want to give those things their full credit. And they could have given these kids a path to habeas relief, and to keep the states honest about how they're supposed to interact with juveniles and interrogate juveniles. Read itself. Reed's freaking literature tells you itself. You cannot use this full technique on a mentally limited kid. Doesn't use those words, but it's essentially cannot use this full technique on a mentally limited juvenile. It's if you do, you are taking a chance at getting it wrong, a large chance. So I feel the Supreme Court really missed a big, really dropped the ball here. Huge ball. And it's a shame that other kids now won't have a path to some kind of resolution after they've been coerced and everything by law enforcement. That's what could have been created here, and it's a shame to me that the Supreme Court decided not to create it.
Yeah,
so,
precisely. They should have taken the case. They should have, they should have been prepared to have a look at it and give their opinion. And they chose not to. They stuck their heads in the sands. They passed the buck. You've got all sorts of analogies as to what they did, but they chose not to take it. My assumption is that they want to see Steve's case go to court with, as you say, evidentiary hearing, potentially a trial, and let's see where it goes from there.
Here. I hope she gets the hearing.
Mhm.
So I think we're going to call it there. We're about 2 hours and 10 minutes. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Travis and Paul, for being here so that we could have this spirited discussion. It was a lot of fun and interesting. So everybody out there, thank you for being here. You want to say goodbye?
I'll say goodbye, and thank you, Paul, for coming up with the topic, and I'm looking forward to hearing your closing words.
Oh, that's going to be the usual. It's goodbye from him. It's goodbye from him. It's goodbye from them. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe.
All right. See you, folks.